Hey guys, this is God of Politics, and welcome back to a brand new video. But before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, join the Discord that is linked down in the description. But today's video is going to be about the protests that have been going on. You could say they might be dying down. We'll see about if that actually happens, due to the fact that all 4 police officers have now been charged. 1 with second-degree murder, the other 3 with accomplices to murder, I believe. But this is going to be about how it affects the 2020 election. Now, this article by GQ is saying 3 reasons why the protest probably won't help Trump win. The first reason is that Trump is the incumbent, whereas Nixon was the challenger. The reason why it's referring to Nixon is because Nixon, if you don't know, in 1968 ran as a law and order candidate, and this was part of the reason that he won. He appealed to a lot of suburban people, saying that he could keep them safe against a lot of these bad things going on. Donald Trump's kind of trying to portray himself in the same way as the law and order candidate, the candidate that can keep people safe. But the problem with this is, as it points out, is that it says there's a large body of research that suggests that voters blame incumbents when things go wrong. This is going to hurt Donald Trump because, if you see his approval rating, which we'll talk about in a second, you can see that this is not helping Donald Trump because there's 2 crises going on at the same time. And whether Donald Trump responds that well to it or not is going to be a different issue. But, there is a lot of pain going on. There's a lot of bad things going on. And Trump portraying himself as a law and order candidate is not the good picture if he can't paint himself as the candidate that can keep people safe, as the person that is going to keep people safe. And so the incumbency thing is a big difference to 1968 with Nixon, because he's an incumbent. He's taking a lot of the brunt of what's happening, not Joe Biden, because Joe Biden's not really in the spotlight right now, and that's what makes this election even more unique. The second reason is that the 2020 election more closely parallels 1992, and that year had a different outcome. It says this is not the first time the protests have erupted in response to racial injustice. The spring before presidential election between a Republican incumbent and a Democratic challenger. If you don't know, 1992 election was between incumbent George H.W. Bush, Governor Bill Clinton, and Ross Perot here. And the protest in 1992 hurt George H.W. Bush. His approval rating was at just below 40%. You had the protests in LA at the non-conviction of Rodney King, and that really hurt George H.W. Bush, among many other things. Most notably, people probably know, is the tax thing, but this hurt too. It says the LA riots lasted for 5 days and led to over 60 deaths. These riots are honestly lasting for longer than that. And it says those riots didn't just fail to bring a recovery in the polls for Bush, who had gone to lose handily to Bill Clinton. When researching the riots, Ryan D. Enos, Aaron R. Kaufman, and Melissa L. Sands discovered that, contrary to some expectations from the academic literature and the popular press, we found that the riot caused a marked liberal shift in policy support at the polls. Whether this happens or not is something that I'm less confident about in terms of how this is going to change the chances for Donald Trump's re-election. But I do believe that this will hurt Donald Trump, at least in the short term, from these protests, because people are dying. There are riots across the country, and Donald Trump in these times needs to convince people that he's going to keep them safe. And law and order could do that, but it's so far not shown to be the case, as we'll see in the approval ratings in a second. And the third reason, the final reason, is that the modern electorate is much more polarized. It says, finally, this is the fact that the voters are different from 1968 and even 1992, and that we know that people have largely made up their minds on Trump. His approval ratings have remained remarkably constant, stuck in the low 40s. This is also very interesting. No matter what crisis goes on, for the most part, Donald Trump's remained his steady approval rating. And what this means is that even Donald Trump, if he improves on the situation right now, he's probably not going to go up in approval rating, because he has his 35-40% base of the party that will vote for him and stay with him no matter what. But if he can't expand on the base, what use is there even portraying him as this candidate at all? Because if he wants to expand his base with this, he had a chance to expand his base, but it really doesn't seem like that likely of a scenario given the rest of his presidency and how it's played out here. And so these are 3 reasons why it's saying that it could hurt Donald Trump or not help him get reelected. What I will say is that I do believe that these will, again, hurt him in the short term. The long term is another question, how long these protests continue to go on for, how long these crises continue to go on for. But I do believe it will hurt Donald Trump. But I also do believe that it will hurt Democrats down ballot, Democrats in these local areas and city areas, these mayors who are running these Democratic-led areas. Because, again, it says they go against the incumbents, so why assume it's going to be any different at different levels of government? So I do believe that this can help both parties. I don't believe it's going to hurt Joe Biden as a Democrat, but I do believe it can hurt down-ballot Democrats in terms of at the local level, the attorney generals of the state, the governors, the mayors, those kinds of things. I believe it could help hurt Democrats. It could hurt Democrats at that level. But we'll see how that turns out here. But looking at some other info here, that could show that it is hurting Donald Trump is firstly the polls between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. The first reason that we'll look at here is that Joe Biden has surged in the polls. The polls have actually been remarkably consistent this entire time, but as we can see here, it's really clear that Donald Trump's fallen in the polls and Joe Biden's gained in the polls. Joe Biden is just hovering around 50% in the polls now. That is a really big milestone for him because he's ahead by 7.8 percentage points now. If the national polls were right in 2016 for the most part, and if Joe Biden's cracking 50% of the vote, he'll probably end up winning because if you compare it to the 2016 results, in 2016, Hillary Clinton actually did better than what the polls said in terms of the actual number, not the margin, but the number. So Joe Biden being at 49.9 percentage points, meaning he's probably going to crack 50% if these polls stay the way they are at this moment. And this is another reason the crisis probably won't help Donald Trump here because it's clearly not helping Donald Trump. People are turning away from him. And again, he has a similar, almost exactly the same as what he has in the approval rating. If we look at the approval rating here, he's at 42.1% in the polls. He's at 42.8% in the approval rating here. And that approval rating is actually taking a big hit as well. His disapproval rating is this is really high. 54% of people disapprove of his job as president of the United States. Only 42.8% approve. And that number looks to be declining pretty rapidly. Just, a couple weeks ago, it was at 46%. It's fallen over 2.5 percentage points down to just below 43%. And so, again, I'll say it again. Donald Trump had a chance to capitalize here. This was his chance to try at least and expand the base, try and unite the country, and it doesn't seem to have worked. This is a problem that Donald Trump's going to have to face because he's painted himself as a law and order candidate, but we'll see whether that actually helps him or not because it helped Richard Nixon, but it said, Richard Nixon wasn't an incumbent. Richard Nixon was a challenger to the system. Donald Trump was a challenger to the system, and now he is the system. Is the system going to help him? Do people trust the system? What is the answer to that question? Really, I don't know, to be honest, but as of now, it's not looking good for Donald Trump. The second to last thing we'll look at is the betting odds here. The betting odds have Joe Biden, going like he's going through the roof effectively in terms of the betting odds. And while the betting odds are not completely accurate at determining things, the reason Donald Trump was up so much in the betting odds is because they had this idea that he was unbeatable. He beat the odds in 2016. Now he's just Teflon Don. He's not going to lose anymore. And that idea is kind of, crumbled now because people do see that they do think that Donald Trump can lose again. And while I'm not going to trust the betting odds, if it's 50-46, I'm not going to say Joe Biden's going to get a certain victory. But to look at what's important is the trends in the betting odds. We can see it's clear as day that Joe Biden is increasing in the betting odds. He's gone from 42% down here all the way up to 50% in the betting odds. Donald Trump's fallen 4 points. Joe Biden's gained 8 points. So people are really coalescing around the idea that Joe Biden is going to be president because of the faults of what Donald Trump's done in their eyes. They see that as a big thing that's going to be they see this as a big issue that's going to still be around come the November election. People are still going to point to him as this. And again, Donald Trump's painting himself as a law and order candidate, but if he can't convince people that he's going to keep them safe in these suburban areas and the urban areas, they're really going to turn out against him. Maybe his base can be energized from this. Maybe that's something that he wants to do because he does need to turn that base out. But can he expand on the base by saying that he's going to send in the military? Those are the questions that are going to have to be answered. And we'll actually look at some of the polling data here. There's a couple pieces of information that could be good for Donald Trump, but the majority of it is bad. The worst one for him is a morning consult poll. A morning consult poll that did have Joe Biden up by 12, so you have to kind of take this information with a grain of salt. but it does say, are you more or less likely to vote for President Trump or Joe Biden as a result of George Floyd's death and subsequent protests? More likely to vote for Vice President Biden, 45%. More likely to vote for President Trump, 31%. This is very interesting because it's saying that, Donald Trump has his chance as the incumbent president to really coalesce the country together, unite the country together, raise his popularity like they normally do in times of crisis. And it's looking like that doesn't seem to be happening here, because it's all this crisis is doing is making it so that more people are thinking about voting for Joe Biden, and we've seen it in the polls, we've seen it in the approval ratings. And while Joe Biden's not a popular person either, the progressives of the Democratic Party hate him. A lot of just normal people in the Democratic Party do not like him. They really do not like Donald Trump a lot less than they don't. They hate Donald Trump more than they dislike Joe Biden. And so that's going to be to the detriment of Donald Trump, because there are a lot of people, this is a really interesting election. Joe Biden's at a net 7 approval rating, for example, and he's still, that's what it showed in the morning consult. Joe Biden's at net 7, -7 approval rating, and he's still beating Donald Trump by 12 points. And that really shows that Donald Trump's actions are very dependent on what the election results will be. If he can prove to people that he's going to be the leader that can keep people safe, he will win the election. That's just what's going to happen. Because people are flocking to Joe Biden because they don't feel safe, because they feel that Donald Trump is going to make things worse. If Donald Trump can prove to people that he's going to make things better, what Joe Biden says is a lot less relevant, and Joe Biden will lose in that situation. But what we've seen right now, all the information we're seeing right now, with 2 crises going on at once, people are losing support of Donald Trump and the Trump administration. The one good piece of information that could be good for him is the piece of information saying that 58% of people support putting in the U.S. military to supplement police forces, city police forces. 58% of people support that. And Donald Trump is going to do that, but now he's since backed off on the move after he's gotten a lot of Democratic governors and mayors, which it could hurt this whole system, this whole crisis. He's got all of them to send in the National Guard, things like that. So he's really not even sending in the U.S. military anymore. And there's a lot of internal affairs going on in the Trump administration of some people saying they don't want to send in the military, such as Defense Secretary Mark Esper. And so there's a lot of things going on right now. This is a very jam-packed video with a lot of different information here, but it's a very important video, I believe, because these protests are a big turning point, a tipping point in our country of what could be to come in this country. It's a very important thing. It's a very good thing to see that people are rising up against, the death of George Floyd, all the things like that. Whether the protests continue to happen is another question, but so far, looking at it electorally, that's what I do. That's what I do on this channel. It's not helping Donald Trump. Will it continue to not help Donald Trump? That's another completely different question. But as of now, this is really one of the low points of the Trump administration, whether you look at it subjectively or objectively. I'm trying to look at it from as objectively of a perspective as I can, and I really don't see how this is going to help Donald Trump. I really do believe this was a chance wasted for Donald Trump, and I do believe that he can bounce back from this. But as of now, this is really going to be a big issue for him. Unless he can do something about it, he's going to be toast come November. That's not necessarily what's going to happen, and I'm trying to look at it from a little a biased perspective as possible, because this really could go either way. I'm saying it can hurt Democrats and Republicans here. As of now, it's hurting Republicans more, I do believe, because Donald Trump's at the top of the ticket. But this could really go either way. A lot of things could still come November. But yeah, this is kind of just talking about how I believe it can hurt, or it can change the results of the 2020 election, these protests. But yeah, thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, join the Discord that is linked down in the description. So thank you all for watching, guys, and I will see you guys later.